All right, this is part 2 of this truly amazing video. This video is going to get exponentially more interesting now, as if part 1 wasn't interesting. Of course, it was very interesting, and this is exponentially even more interesting because now I will bring the big picture into play here. Also, there are only 2 parts. There isn't a part 3. I mentioned in the beginning of part 1 that there might be a part 3. There isn't. This is it. And again, this is very important. There's something specific also in this video that is very important that you need to know. All right. Welcome to this explanation of this diagram here, which is focused on this July 11th date that we have been talking about in this video. This diagram is truly astounding. There is so much involved here, and it is so very, very important and key. It is an important part of the big picture, as you will see. And that's why, as you can see in the diagram, it's crammed with information. And so there's a lot to explain here. This is going to be extremely interesting. And so make sure you watch all of it. It's very important that you do if you are interested in God and his prophetic signs. And so, well, let's get right into it. This diagram begins with July 11th, which is what this video has been talking about so far. This was the day of the prophetic All-Star game in Seattle next to the Space Needle, and the day of the prophetic flooding in Vermont and Montpelier, and the day that the 44-year-old of the 44 million nation spoke up and chastised the other NATO leaders in an unexpected way at their NATO summit. And so there's so much, we've explained all of this, and so I won't get into it again here, obviously. And what was explained in the video, which I'll just show you here in this diagram, is that this connects with 123 days, which is the 42nd prime number, which is Antichrist symbolism, to the day that the Japanese billionaire died at the age of 98 years old, who was responsible for turning 7-Eleven into a global empire, which is why from 7-Eleven, it is 98 days to the date of the death of Kamala Harris, which will lead to the rise of the Antichrist and his rule in a global empire, if you will. So that's, as we can see that here, it's illustrated in the diagram. Now, again, as was explained already, the date 7-Eleven is 7 months and 11 days to the date it is expected or predicted that the sun will erupt and shoot a coronal mass ejection towards Earth, which will cause catastrophic power outages in the U.S. And so, where to now? So what I want to get to here, I think I did explain it in the video already. This connection of 123 days followed by 98 days is also, in fact, 31 weeks and 4 days, which hints at the number pi, 3.14. And that's because God is pointing to, actually, Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4, which is interesting in itself because we are talking about 31 weeks and 4 days. But that's because Kamala Harris will die in St. Louis, in which the area code is 314. And the 31st chapter of the book of Isaiah begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt." And the verse 4 describes Harris's plane crash. It describes the eagles flying and the roar of the lion. And her plane will be brought down by turbulence, which is what is prefigured with the lion's roar in this passage. This prophecy is about something else. in God's end times events, which is the restoration of Jerusalem and the defeat of the Antichrist, which is described later in the chapter. But God uses, he can have dual or multiple fulfillments of a particular prophecy. It's all symbolism. And what I'm saying by all symbol, I mean there is a lot of symbolism. Things can overlap, and God can hint at one thing with another thing. For example, Harris's plane crash in the area code 314, which will hint at Isaiah chapter 31 and verse 4. But it isn't, what I'm saying is it isn't a direct or complete fulfillment of that prophecy. It's just hinting at it. And so we really need to have a mind for symbolism in order to understand God's big picture of signs and, for that matter, prophecy. But this 31 weeks and 4 days is also 7 months and 7 days, which hints at 77, which is what Kamala Harris's plane crash will also point to or hint at, which is Flight 77. Her path of the flight from Los Angeles to Los Angeles, which will fly over St. Louis, will mirror the path of the flight of 77, Flight 77 on 9/11. Also, this connection is also 222 days. And the reason why this is amazing too is because of this. First of all, we're connecting to the date of the predicted explosion on the surface of the sun, February 22nd, but this date in itself is hinting at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. And that's why Harris's crash, which will lead to the Antichrist, connects with 222 days to the rapture, which will be on May 26th, 2024, Pentecost in the calendar that watches for new moons, which God established in 2018, 2019, and 2020 as being the true Pentecost with his... That's explained in other videos. I won't explain it again here. He established a parallel of signs, a trail of signs that paralleled the timing of events in the book of Joshua that climaxed with the walls of security of Jericho symbolically collapsing on Pentecost. For example, on Pentecost in 2019, there was a rare 3.2 magnitude earthquake at Jericho, Washington State. And anyway, but that's been explained so many other times, I won't get into it again. But the point is that we have a 222 days connection followed by another 222 days connection to the second coming, the rapture, the resurrection rapture event on this May 26th date. And that's why this is astounding. And as I will now explain and demonstrate, this date 7/11 is connected to with all kinds of rapture symbolism. And therefore, we can infer that this in itself is hinting at the rapture. It's hinting at Genesis 7:11, which is the first verse in which the flood judgment began. But when the flood judgment began, God's righteous family, Noah and his family, were rescued from the flood judgment, which is a prefigure for the rapture, when God's faithful will be rescued from the extreme persecution from the Antichrist and the tribulation, the pouring out of God's wrath in the final 5 months after the month of May. The second coming and judgment day will be on the Day of Atonement in 2024. And the purpose of these predictions being made in this video is to prove this. That is the purpose of the reason for the prediction and the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, make no mistake. It is to prove these controversial things. And I do realize that there are still a lot of people that still are holding the belief that the tribulation is 7 years long, but it isn't. The 7 years in Bible prophecy symbolically began in 2017. And there were many prophetic, symbolic starting points of that God demonstrated clearly for those that were watching in his prophetic signs. Okay, so anyway, that's not the point of this video, to get into that information. So, but the point is that this 7/11 date is, and in fact, and on this date, as we know, we had the flooding, right? So we definitely have a connection with Genesis 7/11 here, but we need to also remember, keep in mind, that Genesis 7/11 is also the rescue of Noah and his family. And that is why it's connecting profoundly to the date of the fire judgment, because again, as Peter said, the next judgment would be symbolized by fire instead of water. And why, as I've just now explained and demonstrated, it is connecting with the rapture, the rescue. Okay, now this 7/11 date, to confirm what I am saying further, is 144 days to this date here. Now, first of all, 144 days is the prominent prophetic number in the book of Revelation that is symbolic of those that will be raptured. That's also controversial, but this is the case. God has demonstrated this overwhelmingly many times now in his big picture of signs, which is only being explained on this channel, that the number 144 is symbolic of that. And if you read the text correctly, the 144,000 is the raptured. That's what it is. Anyway, so that's why it connects with 144 days to this date here, which is February 17th, which is another Noah's flood date. Because in the account of Noah's flood, the flood began in Genesis 7/11, but the date was the 17th day of the second month, which is February 17th in the Gregorian calendar, which is symbolic of the 17th day of the second month described in the book of Revelation. And so that confirms the 144 days connection to 7/11, which confirms this rapture symbolism. Now, this date was known ahead of time to be a prophetic date that God was pointing to, and one reason being was flood symbolism, and that's why it was astounding to learn after the fact, because it was predicted in advance, that there was the prophetic flood sign. And so this flood sign connects with this flood sign, the flooding of Montpellier and the threat of the dam bursting, which again, the dam bursting is hinting at the waters that burst forth from the deep in the account of Noah's flood. In this flood sign on the 17th day of the second month, it was a tragic incident in which an 11-week-old baby was trapped inside a car that was washed away in a flash flood. 9 emergency rescue agencies, 9 service agencies were involved in the attempt to locate and find the car that had been submerged and trapped the baby. So these 9 agencies that were involved in this rescue attempt of the 11-week-old baby gives us a pairing of 9 and 11 that confirms the signs and connections, because that's how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, and that is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And one simple way in which he would confirm the matter with a second witness is through pairing certain numbers together, for instance, 9 and 11. And this hints at, of course, the warning of judgment on 9/11 in 2001. Now, what gives this further rapture symbolism is that this occurred in West Virginia. Virginia hints at Virgo, the constellation Virgo, which is symbolism for the woman in Revelation chapter 12. For those that are unaware, the Revelation chapter 12, the great sign in heaven, one of 2 signs in the Bible that are called great, the great sign in heaven that is described in Revelation chapter 12 was fulfilled on September 23rd, 2017. And the prediction being made in this video will prove that. There are no doubt some still out there that refuse to accept what other Christians have been telling them about the fulfillment of this sign on September 23rd, 2017. But this was the case, and it was fulfilled in the night sky through primarily the constellation Virgo, which is symbolic of the woman. When John is describing the sign in the night sky, he is describing Virgo. That's the sign he is seeing. He knows through his description, though, that this is describing more than, there's more to it. Well, this is my belief anyway. He is describing a sign in the night sky. Now, what does that mean? The sign in the heavens is the second heaven is outer space, right? It's the night sky. And anyway, the fulfillment of that was the retrograde action of Jupiter inside the womb of Virgo for just over 9 months, which is the gestation period of a human gestation. And anyway, I'm not going to explain the Revelation chapter 12 sign in this video. If you don't know it, I explain it in good detail on the homepage of my website, trumpprediction.com or harriscrashprediction.com or clearlywritten.net. Okay? I highly recommend reading that if you are not familiar with it. It's very important, obviously. It's the Revelation chapter 12 sign. It was fulfilled. Okay, so moving on. That's why this name of Virginia hints at that. It hints at Virgo, which is rapture symbolism. To confirm that further, from this date, we have exactly 6 + 6 + 6 weeks. But it's in fact in the wrong direction. This is a typo. The 6 + 6 weeks should go backwards from this date instead of forwards. Okay? Now that obviously hints at 666, the number associated with the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. This 6 + 6 + 6 weeks exactly is also 126 days. And that also hints at the Antichrist because it hints at 1,260 days, which is mentioned 7 times in Bible prophecy as being the symbolic and only symbolic period of the Antichrist, because we are well inside the 1,260 days, which began on May 2nd, 2021, and that was known 4 years in advance to be the case, and it was confirmed long after it was known with the prophetic sign of the Dragon capsule with its Dragon crew making its first astronaut splashdown since Apollo 8. And anyway, that's obviously hinting at the 1,260 days in the Revelation chapter 12 sign when the dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth. And I've explained this sign so many times, I won't explain it again. So anyway, so we have this 6 + 6 + 6 weeks and 126 days back connection to this sign here involving this woman named Virginia who died at the age of 113. She died on the date 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. And this was 14 years exactly after the 44th president was elected. 14 years is end times symbolism. It hints at the dream that Joseph interpreted regarding the 14 cows, which symbolized 14 years. The latter 7 years was a prefigure for the rapture. It involves famine. There will be rationing of food by the Antichrist, and one will have to take the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing, in order to buy and sell food, as the Bible prophecy describes. So anyway, this woman, Virginia, is famous because she, 7 years earlier, speaking of the 7 years within the 14 years, danced with Obama and Michelle Obama in the White House. And 7 years is prophetic in Bible prophecy as well, as already mentioned, the symbolic 7 years mentioned in Daniel chapter 9. And so it was 7 years before this, not exact, but it's not required to be. She was there during Black History Month. So anyway, she died at the age of 100, and her name Virginia confirms the connection to West Virginia, which makes this also rapture symbolism. She died at the age of 113, and that's because she died exactly 11 months and 30 days before the date 1113. 11 months and 30 days hints at 113, the age at which she died, and it also hints at this date 1113. Now this date 1113 hints at the 1113th word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance, which is the word, the name Belshazzar. I apologize. I usually get that all right, but Belshazzar. Anyway, he is the king in Daniel chapter 5, when the writing on the handwriting on the wall is given in judgment, and this is Antichrist king symbolism. The king drinks and uses the utensils from the temple, and the Antichrist will be on the Temple Mount. And anyway, her rise to the first the vice president's office and then the president's office will be the handwriting on the wall for the rise of the Antichrist, Barack Obama, who will replace Michelle as the president. She will become the president on November 13th, 2023. And that's why this connection. And this is exactly 5 years after her book Becoming was released. And I will explain in other videos more the significance of the number 5 and Michelle Obama and why God has used number 5. It's for one reason, it's to point to this 5-year connection, but she will be the 50th vice president. That's the main reason why the number 5. There was also a famous song written and sung by the band named Fifth Harmony about Michelle Obama, titled Boss, which hints at her becoming the president, the first female president. Okay, so anyway, there you have that. Now, this sign that I've established that which further confirmed the rapture symbolism in this, because again, this is a flood sign. It's a baby. Oh, I forgot to mention the most important thing here. In Revelation chapter 12, the woman gives birth to a baby, the man-child, which is symbolic of God's faithful, the church. But that's why this happened in Virginia, and it was a baby. And it was on the 17th day of the second month, which is hinting at Noah's flood, which again is about a rescue, not only judgment. Okay? And so that's why it connects with 144 days to this, this date, which I explained was rapture symbolism. And the number 144 is rapture symbolism. And it connects to this Virginia sign, which confirms the name Virginia in this prophetic sign, which therefore confirms Virgo, which confirms the woman giving birth to the baby. Now, this date here, this flood judgment sign, which is also a rapture sign, is 8,880 hours, which is the equivalent of 370 days, to the date it is predicted that the sun will erupt with a solar storm and shoot a coronal mass ejection towards Earth, which will cause catastrophic power outages. Greek letters are also numbers, just like Roman letters, and the numeric equivalent of the name Jesus in Greek is 888. The date 222 hints at the second coming and is a step in the trail of sign to the rapture. So it is also symbolism for the rapture because of this. And God has confirmed that through many other connections which contain rapture symbolism. In fact, this date was first learned through such connections, and then it was later learned that it would be the day of the eruption of the sun. And in the account of Noah's flood, there are three sets of 7. 3 sets of 7 days with the birds being sent out, and then the 7 birds, 7 clean animals, and 7 unclean animals. I apologize. I forget the third set of 7 there. It's been a while. So anyway, that's what's hinted at with 370 days. 37 hints at 3 sets of 7. So, and the reason why, of course, Jesus here is symbolized with the 880 hours is because it's hinting at the second coming of Jesus. All right, so we have this 144 days connection here. Going forward from this February 17th date. And then we have also 144 days prior to this, a connection going back. Again, 144 is symbolic of the rapture, those that will be raptured. And this gets us to this extremely important rapture symbolism date, September 26th, 2022. This date, which was the Feast of Trumpets, which is also a feast that is symbolic of the rapture. And furthermore, the Revelation chapter 12 sign coincided in 2017, that was fulfilled in the night sky, coincided with the Feast of Trumpets in 2017. On this date, now this date was known over a year in advance because of this connection here, which is 2,222 days from the closest of the Jupiter-Venus conjunctions. And Jupiter-Venus conjunctions are in themselves rapture symbolism. In the book of Revelation, Jesus said he is the morning star, which is Venus. And we know from prophecy and God's signs that Jupiter is symbolic of the king planet and the Messiah planet and is symbolic of Jesus. I'll give you another example. It isn't only the biggest planet, but it is also known to have moons that orbit it, and 53 of them are officially named. And that hints at Isaiah chapter 53. And in that chapter, it says that the Messiah, by his stripes, we are healed. And Jupiter is known for its stripes. And the big red spot is the big wound. It's called the big red spot. That's its actual name, the big red spot. The big red spot on Jupiter is symbolic of the spear that the Roman soldier pierced Jesus with. And Isaiah chapter 53 talks about how the Messiah will be pierced for our transgressions. And so that's why there's 53 named moons. Okay, so Jupiter and Venus conjunctions symbolize, and Jupiter in the signs, because in the Revelation chapter 12 sign, it symbolizes the church. It's the church that is being birthed out of Virgo, right? So the close conjunctions of Jupiter and Venus have been rapture symbolism. It's the coming together of Jesus and the church in the sky. The church will be caught up into the clouds, as it is said in Bible prophecy. And this was the closest of them in recent years. The one prior to this was also very close, the one in 2015. And that the mainstream media dubbed as the Star of Bethlehem, because it had by that time becoming mainstream news that it has been learned what the Star of Bethlehem was. Part of what it was, because there's two parts, part of what it was the closest ever in history Jupiter-Venus conjunction in 2 BC, when they essentially became one in the night sky. And so that's why the close Jupiter-Venus conjunction in 2015 was dubbed the Star of Bethlehem in the mainstream media, but this was the closest one in all of recent years. And so that's why it's extremely prophetic. And believe me, you would have, I believed, and you probably would have too, at the time, because of this connection, believed that this day would be the rapture. It was learned before this date came and went, that this wouldn't be the day of the rapture, with further understanding of God's prophetic signs. But back when this connection was learned in the summer of 2021, that this conjunction would connect with 2,222 days to this date here, it was of course assumed initially that this would be the date of the rapture because it was on the Feast of Trumpets, and the Feast of Trumpets is also symbolic of the rapture. Okay, but the rapture, one, will not be on the Feast of Trumpets, and two, this wasn't the rapture, but what happened on the state was stunning, jaw-dropping confirmation for this connection. Now, first of all, this is a sign in the night sky, and on this date we had an event in the night sky, which was the DART, NASA's DART probe. DART stands for Double Asteroid Redirect. I forget what the T stands for. Let me just look it up. Okay, it stands for TEST. Double Asteroid Redirect Test. NASA shot a probe at this double asteroid. The one asteroid orbits the other one, so it's a double asteroid. And their attempt to do this was to avoid a to learn from it how, if possible, to redirect an asteroid that may be coming towards Earth. And this date was also known ahead of time to be exactly 216 weeks, which since that's 6 times 6 times 6, after the asteroid occulted the brightest star in the sky, Sirius, which in ancient Hebrew astrology was known as the coming prince. The star is named the coming prince. Anyway, there was a big prophetic sign. It was related to other signs in February of 2019. Let's just mention it. It was 6 + 6 + 6 days, which confirms the 6 times 6 times weeks connection forward, but it was 6 times 6. It was 6 + 6 + 6 days after February 1st, which was the Hawaiian Airlines plane named after the star Sirius. Hawaiian Airlines names each of its planes after a Polynesian star because the Polynesians used stars to navigate, and it was named after Sirius. And that particular plane on that day returned 3 times to LAX airport for 3 separate mechanical issues. It was an uncanny return to LAX airport 3 times for 3 separate mechanical issues. It was Flight 33, and it was an Airbus model A330. And the reason for that is because it spent a total of 390 minutes in the air. And that's because, Jesus was crucified at the age of 33, but also 390 minutes in the air hints at the 390th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word return. The 390th word is the word return. And we had this plane that returned 3 times. The Apostle James used this word return when he quoted Amos 9:11 regarding the Lord's return to rebuild his temple at his second coming. And by the way, the Dragon capsule with its Dragon crew that splashed down at the beginning of the final 1,260 days, it descended from the second heaven a couple of days late behind schedule because of bad weather, and so it made an expedited return. It was a big part of the story, how it returned to Earth from the space station in only 6.5 hours, which is 390 minutes. And so it returned to Earth, which also hinted at the return of the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ 1,260 days later, when he defeats the Antichrist, which is symbolized by the dragon, which is thrown down from heaven to earth. All right, now the reason why the Flight 33 returned 3 times on that date is because it was 33 years exactly after the shuttle disaster of Challenger. Now, the Challenger and Columbia Space Shuttle disasters both occurred almost exactly on the same date. And they are commemorated on the same date every year because of that, February 1st. The Challenger disaster was almost exactly 17 years before the Columbia space shuttle disaster. And these are flights. And that's what happened on February 1st, 2019. It was this flight that returned. Well, why is that? Well, the reason why the two space shuttle disasters were 17 years apart is because the two planes that struck the two towers on 9/11 were 17 minutes apart. 17 minutes and 17 years apart between the two planes on 9/11 and the two space shuttle disasters hints at the Apollo 17 mission, which was the last time that man, an American, an astronaut, stepped off of the moon. It was because the moon symbolizes Christ, a giant rock, and in the Bible, rock symbolizes Jesus. And the sun symbolizes God the Father, and the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. And this is why in the Bible, watching the moon is important, and watching the moon symbolizes watching the prophetic signs, watching the timing of the moon symbolizes watching the prophetic signs, and watching, including moon signs, symbolizes the watching for the return of Lord Jesus Christ. And Jesus commanded us to watch for his prophetic signs. However, if you were to ask the average Christian today to name one single prophetic sign, they wouldn't even understand the question. And this is because they are sleeping, just as Jesus warned they would be. All 10 bridesmaids were sleeping. The only one that was awake and watching was the bride. And the bridesmaids, of course, symbolize Christians. And so, anyway, that's the reason for all of that. Now, I got off onto a tangent here. Now, coming back, we had the asteroid occulted by the, Sirius occulted by the asteroid exactly 216 weeks before this September 26th date, and this connection was known ahead of time. So it was known ahead of time for being connected to the sign in the night sky, the conjunction of Jupiter and Venus, and the other sign in the night sky, which was the occult of the asteroid over Sirius. And lo and behold, on this date, which was completely unexpected, I hadn't known this until the date. I had heard about DART, but I didn't know that it was going to hit the asteroid on this date. And that's what happened. The DART, the NASA, and by the way, I just demonstrated the trail back to the NASA space shuttles to this date. Well, anyway, NASA's probe exploded, and so did the space shuttles when it slammed into the asteroid. In the DART mission, the Double Asteroid Redirect Test. All right, now it was a double asteroid, which confirmed the 2,222 days connection to that date. But not only that, on that same date, the two pipelines exploded in the Baltic Sea when the Biden administration blew them up. And that, if you are unaware of that, I really have a lot of empathy for you. Because if you don't know that by now, that means that you have stumbled onto this channel through God's grace somehow. Hopefully it's because someone passed you a video that you were recommended, but you are in the dark regarding so much else, because what it means is that you only get your news from the mainstream media, which is evil and completely biased and a mouthpiece for the blue team, and the blue team is completely in the tank for their guy, which happens to be Biden right now. It's not about Biden, and it's not about a conspiracy of corruption. It's about a political cult movement and the millennial generation that has been brainwashed into being political activists. It's their meaning in life. It's their religion. political activism. And so journalism has become political activism. And furthermore, in the cult, if you go against the cult, you get kicked out, like any cult. And so anyone in the news industry, if they were to actually report this, they would no longer be working. And that's the way things are today. And that's why it's essential that you not get your information from the mainstream media anymore. And if you don't know that, you know, the famous Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Seymour, I forget his first name, Richard Seymour? No. Anyway, he's, you know, for decades has been breaking stories like this, and once upon a time he had credit in the mainstream media, but he has the connections that are inside the intelligence agencies. That's what he's known for, his connections inside the intelligence agencies, and it's confirmed through them that that's what happened, is that, you know, America, Biden, a couple of unelected warmongers blew up the 2 pipelines in the Baltic Sea. Of course, that's what happened. I mean, you didn't even need to know you didn't even need to know the news or learn the news of the Seymour story to know this. I mean, it's only common sense. The Russians didn't blow it up, and obviously the Ukrainians didn't blow it up either. And so, of course, it was the U.S. that blew it up. Of course. And if you don't know, and if you didn't know that even before the Seymour story, I also feel sorry for you. I also hope that this video will help wake you up. Okay, so anyway, so we had the 2 explosions with the pipelines on the day of the double asteroid explosion. And that was 2,222 days after the closest Jupiter-Venus conjunction. And both of these things are in the night sky. Now, there were other things that happened on this data. There are other connections. I'm only scratching the surface. The Dow closed at 29,260, which hinted at 926, which is the word, what is that word again? The 926th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word for to terrify, to disturb, to tremble inwardly. And that's what will happen when the asteroid hits Earth, which will be on May 26th. The rapture will be on the same day as the asteroid hit. That's why all of this. This is why the double asteroid hit, which is an attempt by man without God to avoid the asteroid hit. That's why this hints at the asteroid hit on this day, on the Feast of Pentecost. This is the Feast of Trumpets. This is which will be the rapture. And that's why the connection to the asteroid that occulted Sirius and the explosions at the bottom of the ocean. I would imagine that this asteroid will hit the ocean because of that. The 2 pipelines that were exploded would be hinting at that. There quite likely will be 2 asteroids, but maybe the asteroid breaks apart or something to that effect. I'm not clear on that. It would make sense given the double asteroid and the symbolism of 2, and furthermore the second coming. But it will be a fulfillment of prophecy in Revelation chapter 8. And let's see, am I ready to move on to that yet? Okay, so anyway, that's why, before moving on, the 926 here, the reason for that, well, the 2000 hints at the 2,000 years after Jesus' first coming, which leaves us with the 926 number, and exactly 926 weeks before this date, September 26th, 2022, was the day of the Indian Ocean tsunami that killed 220,000 people, another series of 2. 220,000 people also hints at the number 220, which is symbolic of Jesus, because the 220th Greek word in Strong's Concordance is the word rooster, which symbolizes Peter, and Jesus gave Simon the name Peter, Petros, which in Greek means rock. Okay? Anyway, the point is that's also another series of twos, and it's believed that that earthquake was triggered by, scientists now speculate that that earthquake was triggered by gravity waves hitting the Earth from an explosion somewhere else in the solar system, in the galaxy. Gravity waves that had traveled here, and so that's symbolism for judgment from the sky, which would be also hinting at the asteroid from the sky. So that's why, anyway, the connection between the gravity waves, earthquake, and this DART, the NASA's probe into the asteroid. Okay, now, also on this day, the Atlanta Braves, the 2021 World Series champions, visited Biden at the White House. First of all, the Braves symbolize the number 44 because the home run king, Hank Aaron, player number 44, played most of his career with the Braves. All right, and also, the Braves won in 2021. They won the 117th World Series. 9 months and 11 days after Hank Aaron died. Player 44 died. He's the home run king, which hints at the Antichrist king. And player 44 died exactly 444 weeks after the Batman movie massacre. And the day that he died was known ahead of time to expect a prophetic sign ahead of time because of this 440 weeks connection. And then lo and behold, player number 44 died on that date. And the Batman movie massacre in the movie the name of the movie was Dark Knight Rises, and that was exactly 42 months after the rise of the Dark Knight. Barack Obama, the 44th president's inauguration. And so, anyway, the inauguration of the 44th president connects with the shooting, and the shooting is symbolism for the you-know-what. The thing that comes out of the gun and goes into people is symbolic of the you-know-what, which is the mark of the Antichrist. And that's what Hank Aaron died of. He died 6 plus 6 days after taking the mark of the Antichrist on the first day of the 117th Congress, which is why the Atlanta Braves won the 117th World Series 9 months and 11 days after player 44 died. The 117th Congress was the first in history to have been opened with a ceremonial prayer to pagan gods instead of the God of the Bible. Because the blue team and the Democrats are working for Satan. And they led the House at that time after the election there. And anyway, that's why the pagan prayer there. It's astounding. But that's why also that prayer occurred at the beginning of the mark of the Antichrist. And then the most famous death from the mark of the Antichrist is Hank Aaron, and he died 6 plus 6 days later. And he took the mark of the Antichrist in Atlanta, which is the home of the you-know-what. He took it for publicity. He was asked by the agency, you-know-what, in Atlanta to do that in order to encourage black people to take the mark of the Antichrist. So, anyway, moving on here. On this date here, so that's the prophetic significance of the Atlanta Braves. Well, they came and visited Biden, which is Antichrist symbolism in itself. And when the Braves chairman spoke, he spoke about the game that the Braves had played the night before, which was an important game because at this time they were in the hunt for the playoffs. And the game was a very dramatic game. It went into extra innings, and it was won with a score of 8-7 with a late night hit. I forget if it was a home run or it was a run batted in, but whatever it was by the player named Harris. His surname Harris, number 2, Harris II. This was the day of the two explosions of the two asteroids and the two explosions, the two pipeline explosions, which was 2,222 days after the Jupiter-Venus conjunction, the conjunction of the two planets. It was Harris II. Of course, this is hinting at how Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, and then Joe Biden will, as her replacement, make Michelle Obama the vice president. Now, the thing is, the score was 8-7, and it went into the 11th inning. And this hints at the passage in Revelation chapter 8, verse 7 through 11. Verse 7 is describing the solar storm coronal mass ejection, and then the 11th verse describes the asteroid hit. This is stunning because this occurred. This guy was talking about this game on the day of the DART, the NASA explosion on the asteroids, right? On this day, the Braves played in Washington a baseball game. They were in town to play a baseball game, and they stopped by to see Biden. That game, they won 8-0. And the winning run, or I forget the details. I apologize. It involved player number 11 and 23. I apologize. Well, anyway, God pairs 23 and 44 to point to the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school, the 44th president. And again, like I was saying, God pairs certain numbers together to confirm the signs and connections. So I'm pretty sure I explained the details of this in another video, so I'm going to excuse myself from not getting all the details out here. Okay, but the 8-0 also hinted at Revelation chapter 8. That's also the point. And the player number 11 was the key player. Oh, I'm sorry. This guy Harris, okay? Harris II, he's number 23. It's coming back to me now. So he was the guy in the previous night's game. And this game was about player number 11. And it was the 8-0 score, which also hints at Revelation 8:11, which is the verse involving the asteroid. The reason why this player was number 23 is because it, of course, hints at how Barack Obama will become the president again through the death of Kamala Harris. And this was Harris II. It's so stunning. God is so genius because this was all about the number 2 on this date, as I've explained. Oh, by the way, the Feast of Trumpets is a 2-day feast. Most Jews, for example, celebrate this feast as 2 days. It's the Feast of Trumpets. It's a 2-day holiday. And so that's more 2 right there too. Okay, now to recap, to summarize, from this close Jupiter-Venus conjunction, which is a stunning rapture sign, resurrection rapture sign, when the church meets the Lord in the sky, it is 2,222 days to these signs involving the number 2 on the Feast of Trumpets, the 2-day feast that is symbolic of the rapture of the church. And the rapture will be when the asteroid hits. In turn, this day is 144 days, which symbolizes those that will be rescued in the rapture. And then another 144 days to this date here, and the flooding and the date rapture symbolism as was explained. And in turn, this connects with 98 days and then 222 days to the rapture. Okay, so there you have it. We have a connection from the Jupiter-Venus conjunction to the rapture, and it involves 2,222 days. It begins with that and ends with 222 days. And I knew all along from 2016 or 2017, I knew that this date would eventually connect to the rapture. And this is a profound, stunning trail of signs that leads to the rapture. All right, now, this February 17th date, I forgot to confirm the flood symbolism in this date. Again, it was the 17th day of the second month. The prophetic sign was the drowning of the 11-week-old baby in the flash flood. But this was exactly 62 weeks after this woman drowned in the Niagara River. 62 weeks comes from the most central prophecy in the Bible, the 70 weeks prophecy, which is broken into a period of 62 weeks and 7 weeks and then a final week. And so, in other words, this is very prophetic, this 62 weeks connection. And we have this flooding with the Virginia and the baby sign, which is Revelation chapter 12 symbolism. And that's what was symbolized with this woman that drowned in the river. Because in Revelation chapter 12, after the baby is born, the baby gets snatched up into heaven, is rescued, and then the dragon chases the woman into the wilderness where she hides, and then the dragon attempts to drown the woman with a river of water, which is why this woman drowned in the Niagara River close to the edge of Niagara Falls. What is uncanny about this story is that the identity of the woman was never learned. Even months later, the media reported on the story again as a follow-up and said that they still hadn't learned the name of the woman. That is because it is hinting at the quote-unquote woman in Revelation chapter 12. She drove her car into the river from Goat Island. In the Bible, goat is Antichrist symbolism. All right? And the goat was used in the ritual sacrifice by the ancient Jews on the Temple Mount on the Day of Atonement. The Antichrist will be defeated on the Day of Atonement, but the reason why I mention that is because in the 70 weeks prophecy, it leads to the end times where the Antichrist will be on the Temple Mount. Okay, in the account of Noah's flood, there is a 40 days period. The flood waters increased for 40 days. That is why exactly 40 days back was the collapse of Hamlin, Denny Hamlin, on the football field, and he collapsed because he took the mark of the Antichrist. And everyone knows that, but because it's a political cult, you can't say it. You're not allowed to say it out loud. He refuses to say it out loud. He almost said it in an interview, but he said, I'm not going to go there, for example. And the interviewer knew what he was talking about, but of course, he isn't going to go there either. And on and on. And so everyone knows, because football, anyway. So the point is, though, here is that in this flood event, one of the towns in West Virginia in which the high school students were told to shelter in place due to flooded roads was Hamlin. Hamlin, Virginia was a part of the story. That's why Hamlin to Hamlin there, 40 days. Okay? Now, also Niagara Falls is symbolic of Noah's flood. Forgot to mention that. It symbolizes the power of water moving over the earth. The historic barge that has been stuck on the Niagara River was involved for over 100 years, since the year of Spanish flu, not by coincidence. God is pointing to Spanish flu for you-know-what reason. And anyway, this barge, it was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls, which is symbolic of the rescue of Noah and his family in a boat. Also, Niagara Falls engenders a perennial rainbow, and the rainbow is God's sign regarding judgment described in the account of the flood. And the Antichrist is the rainbow president who famously lit up the White House in rainbow colors. By the way, at the time of the Star of Bethlehem Jupiter-Venus conjunction in June of 2015. All right, so that's also, anyway, confirmation of this flood sign here on February 17th. This February 17th date is also exactly 690 days, which is also a hint at the most central prophecy in the Bible, the 70 weeks prophecy, which has a 69 weeks period in it. Jesus arrived in his first coming at the completion of the 69 weeks. There is a pause of 2,000 years in the prophecy before the prophecy resumes symbolically for the final week, which is a period of 7 years, which symbolically began in 2017. Anyway, this 690 days connection connects exactly back to this prophetic boat sign, which was when the cargo ship in the Suez Canal finally broke free after being stuck for 9 days. And it broke free due to the moon tide, and then was towed to Bitter Lake. So, and it was in Egypt. And so this is symbolism for so many things, including the crossing of the Red Sea out of Egypt as the Hebrews were rescued. And again, the boat is symbolic of the rescue in Noah's flood. The moontide symbolizes Christ. That's why the escape from Egypt, it was a prefigure, because before the Hebrews left Egypt, they painted the blood of the lamb on the doorposts and the lintel, the crossbar atop of the doorframe, which was a prefigure for the cross and the sacrifice of the Lamb of God, God's only son, which is also prefigured with the call of Abraham to sacrifice his son. And so anyway, all of that is contained in the Suez Canal ship that got stuck, okay? And then it got towed to Bitter Lake. Those that will not be saved and not be raptured will perhaps be bitter. Although it's not necessarily the case, hopefully they will repent and not be bitter. So anyway, now the day the ship got stuck, which was 6 days earlier, on the 23rd of March, was exactly 42 months after the Revelation chapter 12 sign was fulfilled in the night sky on September 13th, 2017. And 42 months is mentioned 7 times in Bible prophecy as being the symbolic period of the Antichrist's rule. 42 months is 1,260 days, which was explained earlier. All right, so there's more confirmation there, again, of the Suez Canal ship being released due to the moon tide, which is symbolic for the rapture, because it connects to the rapture sign. So also, this rapture sign, as you can see now, connects to the rapture, which of course we would expect it to do so. It connects with 42 months and an extremely prophetic 690 days, which is symbolic of not only the first coming, but also the second coming, because it hints at the final period before the second coming in that central prophecy in Daniel chapter 9. And then followed by 144 days, and then 98 days and 222 days. Okay. Anyway, the point is that these connections here are further confirmation for the flood sign on this February 17th date, which is also, again, rapture symbolism, as I have explained including the date itself, because that's when the Noah's Ark was lifted up high up off the earth with the floodwaters, which is a prefigure for God's faithful being raised up into the clouds, high above the earth. All right, now, so if we go back to this February 17th date here, we have a little bit more to explain, because as I mentioned, we have this 31 weeks and 4 days connection, which hints at pi 3.14. Here we have 31 weeks and 4 days back from this date here, which gets us to this other July 11th date, this 7/11 date in 2022. Now, this was the day that a woman gave birth to a baby in West Virginia in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven. This is astounding. The date was 7/11, and the woman gave birth in the parking lot of 7-Eleven on this date in West Virginia, which hints at Virgo, and the woman in Revelation chapter 12 that gives birth to the baby, which is why she gave birth to the baby on the 7/11 date. And again, 7/11 hints at the rapture because of the rescue of Noah and his family at the beginning of the flood, which hints at Genesis 7:11. Okay, so that's astounding. And again, this connects to this West Virginia sign, which involved a baby. Okay, now this 31 weeks and 4 days is also 7 months and 7 days, which hints at 7/11. But also on this particular 7/11 date, in California, 2 shooters robbed 6 7-Eleven stores and 1 donut shop for a total of 7 stores, mostly 7-Elevens. You could look at it as like 7 7-Elevens in a way. And that's amazing because we also have this 7 months and 7 days connection. But not only that, this coincidence of 7-Elevens on the date 7/11 was also the day that the woman gave birth to the baby in the parking lot of the 7-Eleven. One of the shooters was 44 years old, which hints at the 44th Antichrist, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. And the thing that comes out of guns and goes into people is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. Do you know what I mean? Now, here is the big thing. And in fact, this diagram could have been started with it. Hopefully you've made it this far. This is the most important thing. In the shooting, there were 2 deaths and 3 injured. And that hints at the number 23. Furthermore, it hints at 2 terms followed by a 3rd term for the Antichrist, the 44th president. Also, Jesus said to Peter that the rooster would not crow twice before Peter would deny him 3 times, and taking the mark of the Antichrist is tantamount to denying Jesus. Which is why if one takes it, they will go to hell. But I believe that one can repent. And furthermore, that only makes sense since so many people have already taken it. But also, furthermore, there is nowhere in Scripture that says that you cannot repent. Anyway, the reason why this is tragic beyond words and worth crying over is that this sign, which I've now just demonstrated is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, and the 2 deaths and 3 injured, which hints at 23, which is confirmed with the 44 because God pairs 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections. The 2 deaths and 3 injured were shot by the 44-year-old. This hint at 23 connects with exactly 23 days after the mark of the Antichrist was approved for 6-month-old babies. By the way, the Braves won the World Series on the same day, and the final out was made by God uses final outs in World Series as prophetic signs. This prophetic final out was made by player number 5, and this was the same day that the mark of the Antichrist was approved for 5-year-olds in Atlanta. No. I don't know if that was in it. But anyway, the Braves won it. Anyway, you understand what I'm saying. And that's why it was also 9 months and 11 days after Hank Aaron took the mark of the Antichrist. But that was 5-year-olds, okay? But here we have a connection of 23 days from the 2 deaths and 3 injured in the 7-Eleven parking lots on the day that the baby was born in the parking lot to the day that it was approved for 6-month-olds. It's a crime against humanity in the biggest possible way. Okay, and so that's the big thing here. Make sure you share this. Make sure you share this video with everyone, and don't ever stop sharing it, because they need to know what I just explained. Okay, make sure you share this video. And don't stop sharing it. That goes for all of the videos, really. But this is very, very important, obviously. Now, this 7/11 date here was exactly 95 years, which hints at Noah, who died at the age of 950. And again, the flood began in Genesis 7:11. It is exactly 95 years back from this 7/11 date to this 7/11 date in 1927, which was the year of the Jericho earthquake. It was the most destructive and deadly earthquake in modern history. And it also stopped the Jordan River precisely where the Jordan River was stopped when the Hebrews crossed the Jordan River in the book of Joshua. And after they crossed the Jordan River, they took the promised land by taking Jericho with a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They marched around the walls for 7 days, once per day, and then on the 7th day, 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. They marched 7 times on that 7th day as well. It was a symbolic 3 sets of 7. And again, there are 3 sets of 7 in the account of Noah's flood. But that's why it's recorded that the Jordan River was stopped for 21 hours, 3 sets of 7 hours in 1927 on the date 7/11. Okay, now I explained already a bit of this in the video already. So now, which again, to remind you, it connects with the river that flooded Montpellier, the Jericho River here, the Jordan River, with the Jericho earthquake. Now, this date here, with the woman being born in the parking lot of West Virginia, is hinting at the first woman president, who will first become the vice president exactly 69 weeks later on 11/5, which hints at 11 times 5 equals 55, which hints at the 50th vice president. But again, 69 weeks comes from the most central prophecy in the Bible. That's why it's extremely profound. And what confirms that is that it is exactly 70 weeks, which is also from that prophecy about the 70 weeks prophecy, to the date it is predicted that she will become the 47th president. Okay? Which will lead to the Antichrist. Also, I forgot to mention, this 222 days here is 7 months and 9 days, which hints at 79, which is the 22nd prime number. So that's a second witness to the 222 days here between Harris's crash and the rapture. Harris's crash will be in St. Louis, near the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt, which is where the 2 eclipses will cross over each other, which will engender an X over the country, which will be symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which is symbolic of the Tav mark, which is the 22nd letter in the Hebrew alphabet and the last letter in the alphabet. And the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, the 22nd book out of a total of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. And so that's why the number 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. And that's another reason why the rapture will be 222 days after Harris's crash, which will point to the mark of the Antichrist through pointing to the eclipses. And that's why this 222 days connection is also this, which hints at 79, the 22nd prime number. All right, now this, okay, so these 7-11 dates is also the day, this 7-11 date in 2022 is also the day of the release of the 90-second video, which was a public service announcement by the city of New York telling people what to do in case of a nuclear attack, which was quite unusual and surprising for the people of New York, which is why it was a viral news story. But this 90 seconds pairs with the number 23 right here, which confirms the signs and connections, which further confirms the 23 days connection, because God pairs 9 and 23. The president that became president in 2009 wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball, and will become the president again in 2023. This date here connects with exactly, I forgot to put it in the diagram. It connects with 63 weeks exactly to the date it is predicted that there will be a dirty bomb of nuclear material in New York City. 63 weeks hints at the number 9. It is a multiple of 9, and 6 plus 3 equals 9. And it connects with this 90 seconds video. The predicted dirty bomb will be on September 25th, 2023. This date here was also the day after, by the way, was the prophetic siren warning on the beach near the nuclear plant in the 9th state to join the Union. But this July 11th date was also the day of the quote-unquote Armageddon. Armageddon. Armageddon was more than one day sign, but the media called it Armageddon. But it gives us, this prophetic sign gives us a specific date, which is July 11th, because this was the date that Delta Airlines Flight 9888 flew one of its planes filled with baggage. There were no passengers, only baggage, 1,000 bags. Armageddon was all about the lost baggage crisis. Delta hints at the mark of the Antichrist because Delta brainwaves will be a part of whatever is coming that will induce the pandemic of zombies. More will be explained about that in other videos. But Flight 9888 confirms that this is a prophetic sign because God pairs the numbers 9 and 88 together. And furthermore, I also explained that 888 is the numeric equivalent of the name Jesus in Greek, and the number 9 is the most important number in God's prophetic signs, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment. Hence, 9888 hints at judgment by Lord Jesus Christ at his second coming. Also, it hints at 9/11, the heroes of the 88th floor, and the 9-foot-high Wall Street, which is explained in other videos. I've explained it many times, and I'm starting to run out of voice here and energy, so I'm going to cut it short. and not explain that. So this July 11th date, oh, sorry. Let's see. Now, this 7/11 date is hinted at with this 71 weeks connection to the date it is predicted that Barack Obama will become the 48th president on November 19th. Again, this is flood judgment. We have the 9 and 20. We have the Barack Obama numbers on this date. We have the 2 deaths and 3 injured in the thing that comes out of guns and goes into people. And the mark of the Antichrist will be enforced by the Antichrist. So hence the 71 weeks connection. And also we have the signs in 7/11. The woman giving birth in the 7/11 and the shootings in the 7/11s. Okay? Now, okay. Now, this sign here, as was explained, well, I already explained it. This was the sign involving the high places symbolism, which I already explained. And I already explained this connection. But here you can see it in the diagram. Exactly 5,200.00% of a year back was the day of the release of the movie The Horseman, which is Revelation symbolism, end times symbolism. And that date was also exactly 444 months, which hints at the Antichrist, which is one of the 4 horsemen, to the date that the Antichrist, the 44th president, gave his prophetic speech near the seat of Satan in Berlin, which I explained. Okay. Now, let's see. Yes, this is exactly 52 months after the prophetic sign involving the quarterback that won the MVP for Super Bowl 52, which I already explained, which is in turn exactly 3 times 70 months, which hints at 3 sets of 7 after 9/11 and 2001, which I already explained. Okay, so the 52 months connects to the high place signs, and that was the highest ever scoring Super Bowl. That's why the 52 months from the MVP from Super Bowl 52. The John Frankenheimer movie, The Horseman, hints at his other movies, 52 Pickup and Black Sunday, which is about terrorism at a Super Bowl, as I already explained. Okay, so I think that there's only a couple more things to explain here. It's exactly 66 weeks from this July 11th, 2022 sign. The Armageddon sign connects to Kamala Harris's plane crash, which hints at the 66th book in the Bible, the book of Revelation, and in that book, the Antichrist's number is 666, which 66 hints at. Okay. Now, one last thing I think is that this date here, the day that the 98-year-old Japanese guy died, this 131 days I already explained as well, because of the mark of the Antichrist symbolism with the space needle, and 131 is the 32nd prime number, and the 131st word in Strong's Concordance is the word for blood disease. Okay, I already explained that. One last connection, which is this 199 days connection to the date it is predicted that the dirty bomb will explode. 9 and 19, number 9, judgment. 19 symbolizes God's perfect judgment, and it also symbolizes 9/11. 9/11 took place in New York City. The reason for this is because it was this is why the guy that turned 7/11 into a global empire, which hinted at the Antichrist, is from Japan, because Japan symbolizes nuclear weapons. So that's why his death connects with the dirty nuclear bomb in Manhattan. All right. I think that's it. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media.